Hello Stampers, I'm Diane Keogh and I'm here to show you how I made this card, but more importantly to show you, to feature some of our new products, especially the watercolor pen. This is the card that I made in my class this week and people seem to be pretty happy with it. So we started off with this stamp set, Helping Me Grow, one of my favorites. And there's a big stamp in there and it has some flowers here and here, stems, but I decided I only wanted to use one of them, so photopolymer, just cut it right in half like that. So this stamp goes on here, this stamp goes on here. Let me show you the other things we're going to be using to create this card. I think I told you we're going to use watercolor pencils. We are going to use So Saffron ink, that's just for the little part of the center of the flower. We're going to use the mint macaron. We're going to use sweet sugar plum and gray, basic gray. This is an archival ink, so you want to use either basic gray or basic black when you're using things like aqua painters, even the blender pens. That way you know it's not going to smudge. When I'm doing something where I want to color, like I did on this card, I always like to use the gray. It's not so harsh and you get a little bit softer look, and the feature is more, the focus is more on the flower. So that's why I like to stamp with gray. What I did in my class this week, we used this stamp on the piece, the card base, which is mint macaron, and the measurements for that are 4 1/4 by 11, scored at 5 1/2. And what I did was just, I'm not going to take time to do it now, stamp around the outside with the mint macaron ink on the mint macaron. So it just gives you a little interest, and you might have to really study that to see that. But when I first made the card, it looked a little boring without that on the side. So that was the first step. The next is to look at this piece of sweet sugar plum, and I wanted to have the butterfly, and again I wanted a little interest, so I just took this one little stamp, stamped sweet saffron ink, and then slid in my punched it out, and now you can see the butterfly has a little bit of design on it. And then this piece of paper is still perfectly fine to use because we're going to cover it with this piece, so no problem. All right, so let's put those aside and focus on the really important thing we're doing today, and that is working on this flower. So as I said, I like to use the basic gray when I'm stamping something that I'm going to color in. So we're going to use this stamp. Remember, this is photopolymer, so you want to stamp on something like your piercing mat so that you have a good surface to stamp on. Because there's no layer of rubber here, you want to have that stamping on there. So I'm going to try to get this in the center, and I'm going to press, and I'm going to make sure that I've pressed evenly. You know, if you got one little area that's a little tiny bit lighter, it's not really going to be noticeable once you do the coloring. That's the whole idea. You don't want to notice the background so much. Now, what I'm going to do with this one is start with the pencils. And if I just did pencils, that's what it would look like. Okay, it's okay. I could certainly do that on a piece of paper that would be not, this is the watercolor paper. It has a little texture to it, which, by the way, you have to remember when you start adhering it. Whenever you have a paper that's embossed or has any kind of a texture, you want to make sure that you use a lot of adhesive because you've got some bumpy areas there. So I'm just going to color this in quickly. I'm not going to do the entire business here because I just want to show you something. So this is what it looks like when you color. And of course, I could press more in some areas to get little highlights, and I might go back and do that later. But for right now, like there maybe. Okay. This is Melon Mambo. The pencils match up with colors in the Stampin' Up! Stampin' Up! Family here. You can see on the back they have a nice selection of colors, including white, which is going to come in handy, I'm sure. So for now, we're just going to stop right there. And I'm going to take the aqua painter and just show you what happens. Now, I always like to just check and make sure it's clean. Just wipe it off on a piece of scrap paper there. So I'm going to take that. And it pulls the color from the pencil. And it kind of smooths it out. I don't know how else to describe it. But it gives it more of a pink. You get to really see that melon mambo, a soft color. And I'm sort of trying to pull some of that color down to the edge to get a little darker there. And I could just go back and add some pencil if I wanted, but I'm trying to move along here. All right, so got a nice watercolor look here. Now the other thing I want to show you is I could do the same thing, and to be honest, it ends up looking just about the same with a blender pen. Now with the blender pen, I feel like maybe I have a little bit more control, but I don't get maybe as watercolory a look, although to my eye it's pretty close. So these petals I'm doing with my blender pen. So to me, that's a more solid color, and these are a little bit more shaded. Here's some that I did earlier. We have the pencils. We have the pencils with the aqua painter and the pencil with the blender pen. And you're going to see it's just a matter of shading, I think, and depending on what look you're going for. But it's entirely up to you. What look are you going for? What do you want? This I did just with aqua painters because I was focusing on that in my class. And you can see it's a little different. It's a little different than the pencils in aqua painter. I think you have more opportunities for shading with the aqua painters by themselves. I love aqua painters. Some people are not as comfortable, prefer the blender pen. So that's pretty much it for the card. You're going to obviously finish painting, and you won't have the titles on there. You're going to adhere this. You're going to wrap about 12 inches of ribbon here, make a knot, trim it, and that goes, whoopsie, sorry, that goes on the front of the card. Butterfly goes on with a glue dot, and then I put some basic pearls on there. On the inside, I took a piece of Very Vanilla and just took that same little tiny stamp that I used and put some in the corners just to give it a little interest. There are some really, really nice sentiments in this set. Much appreciated, friend, thanks, so forth and so on, thanks, sweet. So I will probably, when I'm ready to mail this, I'll decide what sentiment I want to put on the inside. But I have to say, I really loved this card. The measurements are, I gave you the green, the mint macaron. This piece on my card, I made these a little bit smaller when I was just experimenting. The 2.5 by 5 1/4. So that this piece is going top to bottom. You don't really have any margin. I just wanted that look, but you could certainly change it up if you wanted. Then on the inside, the Very Vanilla is 4 1/4 by 4 by 5 1/4. Sorry, I'm mixing them up today. So, love the watercolor paper. It's a great thing to use when you're doing with the aqua painters. I think certainly if you're just doing the pencils, you don't have to use the aqua painter, the watercolor paper, but it makes it nicer. So it's a different look. So thank you so much for stopping by today. I hope you'll try the color pencils and some of the different techniques that I've shown you today, and just have a good time. Thank you.